Okay, so there are 3 construction techniques, main ones that we're going to be working on. From me today, you're going to get a slab of clay that looks just like this. What's really nice about this is it's already pre-wedged is what it's called. So wedging or having wedged clay means that all the air has been sucked out of it already, which is awesome because that means that we shouldn't have any explosions in the kiln. This is why I want you guys, if you're doing slab, okay, for your construction method, that's the first one we'll talk about, you're just going to lay it down. You're going to need 2 slab sticks. They look like this. They're up in the box, up in front. And then you're also going to need a rolling pin. On your table, you'll notice you have canvas and you also have tools. Okay, I grabbed a few extras over here by the counter, which I'll go through here in a minute. But the first step that you're going to do is you're going to roll out your slab. So for me, it makes more sense to make this thing fit on my canvas, to put my slab sticks on either side. You might have to move the chair. And then I'm going to start with the rolling pin. Okay, and if you're someone like me that doesn't have like a lot of leverage on this thing, what I like to do is not necessarily hold out here. I start in the middle of my clay and I press here and I push out and then I pull back towards me. Okay, I do it about 2 or 3 times, and then the next step is to pull it off. Use gravity, so flip it, okay, and then set it down and go again. Okay. And the idea here behind these sticks is that you want the slab to have even thickness. If it doesn't have even thickness, then it cooks kind of funny or shrinks funny, and then there's a chance for it to explode as well. Okay, you can also kind of swing it a little bit, okay, if it's like really getting tricky, and then you can kind of throw it down. Okay, and then this is kind of probably going to be my last one. Okay, you'll know because you won't be able to push the clay down anymore. Okay, it'll hit the sticks. And that's how you know it has that even thickness of sticks. So you need to make sure you grab 2 sticks that are the same thickness, right? Okay, once you have that, okay, I actually have one more roll to do. Here's my suggestion. Before you start cutting out all of your pieces, if you're going to use a texture plate, do it right here, right at this step. Okay, I have my sticks on there. Okay, I have this on there. I'm going to press. If I feel like I need to, only, like, you gotta be careful if you do it this way, because now I don't have the sticks to keep it even, right? I'm just gently pressing, not very hard, and I could get a little bit more of that design down if I needed to. Okay, now I'm gonna peel it up, and voila, now I have my design done, right? Okay, now it's time to start cutting it. So depending on what you're making, okay, if I were making a cylinder, I could just decide, oop, I just wanna cut off, like, this is the top part of the cylinder, I'm gonna use this for the bottom or the base. You could take a needle tool, or if you have one of these knife modeling tools, you could take that and cut it, right? So the thought there, I could take it, cut it, and then I could cut here. Okay, and then you guys saw from some of those videos, okay, you can check your thickness. Mine got a little thin on the one side there. Okay, but now I could start wrapping it, right? And then here's the thought, you want to actually overlap your areas here. And the reason why you overlap is then you would take your needle tool, or again, your modeling tool, and you're going to cut down this seam at an angle. Okay? And the reason why we cut at an angle is so that when I go to piece it back together, whoop, kind of missed there at the bottom, but that's okay. When I go to score and slip, okay, scoring means scratching, right? Scratch it up. I'm going to give you guys a bucket of slip, or you can just use straight water. You have to do it on both sides. Okay, and then you're going to piece it together. Do you notice how now it actually goes together really nicely versus having like a huge lump on that seam? Okay, that's important to get that piece and structure in there. Then once you have it, okay, I'm not going to take the time to smooth and blend it here, but now I could go through and I could measure out how wide does my base need to be. It's okay if you leave it a little extra big because then you'll just use it to smooth over. I can pull it off, I can cut my shape that I need and then attach it together, okay? So now let's talk about if you're doing like more of a box. Okay? There are these little cookie cutters over here. This is probably about the size you want to build your box if you're going to do a 6-sided box. Okay? If you're going to do maybe more like a tray, you could get away with using one of these bigger pieces, but you can't make a box this big. There's just not enough clay to do this many pieces to make a whole box. Okay? So you could take this little cookie cutter and put it down there. I also have little paper ones up front there, so you could lay down a little paper pattern and then go through and cut out all of your pieces. Now the idea here is that you want to get all of your pieces next to each other, so be careful when you're popping this out. You don't want to damage the thickness of your slab, okay? So that one looks good, and then I would want to go right next door and try and get as many before you have to roll out again, right? Okay, so once I have that, I'm going to pull one more here. when you go to start building and putting the pieces together, and actually I should say this first. For today, if you're doing slab construction, you want to get all of your pieces cut. That would be a good goal for today. Okay, try and get them all cut and laid out. Okay, just like so. But then, here's why you want to do that. Tomorrow then, you can take your pieces, and if you're going to, for example, if these are going to be the sides, and say I had a couple more slabs, I had one here, one here, and one here. Okay, this is the next step. Instead of taking and trying to like match them up so that they're like on top of each other like so, matching up like that, we have this really cool tool called a beveled edge cutter. Looks like this. Okay, and what you would do is, I like to teach my students to mark where they're going to come together in the corners, so the sides that are the corners. So I have them just kind of make a little tick mark. This is the side, this one technically would be a side, and this would be a side too. This is the top, that would be the bottom, right? Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take this little guy. And what's super cool is you take it and you just slide the wood piece directly up to the edge of the clay, and you pull down with that wire, and it makes a perfect like 45-degree angle cut. Okay, then I'm going to switch it to the other side, do the same thing, line up the wood directly to the side of the clay and pull down. Okay, this does take a little bit of practice. Okay. And then once I have that, what's super nice is then I can score, slip, and piece it together, and now it comes together with a nice little pretty picture frame. Okay, and it makes it way nicer on the edges of your project. Okay, so that goes to show you how to make a beveled edge, is what that's called. Okay, so now that I have that, I would save these because you can just turn them into little baby coils, and then you can use those coils in the seam to stabilize your walls. Okay, all right. So we just covered slab. Let's talk about pinch pot next. Okay, so if you are going to do pinch pot, you need to do a process called wedging. Okay, wedging means compressing the air out again, right? Okay, so you can do it a couple ways. I've seen students do it the way that I'm doing it right now, okay, where they just take and they compress their hands together. It's not the best form of wedging that you can do, but it works. Okay, and then what I teach my students to do is to do like what I call the cube method. Okay, you start slamming down your project into the shape of a cube. And the reason why you do this is every time you are kind of gently throwing it down, the compression of the clay is compressing the air out and pushing it out. Okay, so you're going to want to do this just a couple times. It doesn't have to be a perfect cube, but just keep rotating it. Okay, and then eventually, okay, if we're doing pinch pot next, okay, I'm going to like kind of smack the corners in to make a sphere. And then I'm going to take my thumb, and after I have kind of a nice sphere, you can make it rounder than mine too. I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to push it straight down into the center. Okay, and now what I'm going to start doing is very slowly. This is a process that should take you like 5, 6 to 10 minutes. Okay, a lot of students, the reason why their pinch pots break is they do it too fast. Okay, if you need to, you can kind of get your fingers wet. Okay, but the idea here is that you're pulling from the inside and pulling up. Okay, so I'm kind of pinching and pulling my thumb upwards. And you can also do it on the outside with your outside fingers as well. Okay, but you want to go slow. If you go too fast and it starts to crack, and you can either use a damp sponge, okay, wet it down, and then you can go through and kind of smooth it out. Okay, eventually, okay, as I'm going through here, you can switch directions. Okay. If you notice that one side of your wall starts to get too tall, you can gently tap it on the table, okay, to get it back to the same size. You can pull from one side of the wall to the other if you need to. And then my last suggestion for you is when you get to the very end, so this is kind of like a very thick pinch pot, okay, but just for time's sake, I'm going to move on. You can take the flat side of your metal scraper and you can kind of almost scoop up the edges to smooth them out. Okay? Then you would take a damp sponge and do a final smoothing on the outside of your bowl. Okay? Same process on the inside. Any questions about a pinch pot? Okay. Last method is coil, right? So for coil construction, I would actually go back to the pre-wedged slab before I rolled it out. And then what I would do is after you have it all rolled out to the thickness that you would like, I would take a slab stick, and then all I would do is just measure out the slab stick and make little lines. And the reason why I would do this is then you're going to get coils that are all the same size. So if that's something that you're going for, you want even thickness with your coils. If you cut it, and then what you're going to do is you're going to create like a drill bit. Okay? And then I love that we have these nice smooth tabletop desks, because then you don't want to roll it on the canvas anymore. You're going to want to roll it on your desk. Okay? And you can start with one hand. Okay? The trick is if you're going to do two hands, You don't want your hands to be rotating at different paces. You want them to be rolling together. If you start to get the pancake, okay, the floppy pancake, you just turn and you twist it again, make a drill bit, okay, and then you roll out again. I like to use kind of these parts of my hand. Some students like to use this part of your hand. Whatever works good for you works. And then remember with coils, you don't want them to be too thick. So anything bigger than 1/2 inch is gonna possibly explode. So something like that could work. And then you decide, you know, how do you want it to piece together? Do you want a coil that looks like this? Okay, and then you would start attaching it. If you notice it's starting to crack, that means your clay is getting too dry. You might want to spray down your clay a little bit or take a damp sponge and kind of gently smooth it. Okay, that's my really fast tutorial for the 3 main techniques. You guys know drape mold. You would just roll out a slab, mold it over the top of your project. When it comes to wheel throwing, if you haven't watched that video yet in Google Classroom under the PowerSchool Weekly Doc in the clay presentation notes, I would do that really quick, but otherwise I will help you in that process. Any questions right now for this project? For our cleanup process, in order to get your project put away correctly, you have your bag that has your name on it and your bin number. This is the square that you're going to put your project back onto. For me, I didn't actually get any of my project pieces, so I just have my ball of clay lumped up here, and I'm going to put this into my art bin. So extra clay is going to go in your art bin. If you have clay pieces, you're going to get a second baggie. You're going to write your name and number on that one, and then you can keep your project back on your square on the back counter. So that's how you're going to store your clay. Make sure you seal your baggie tightly so no air can get to the clay. Okay, so at the end of the hour, it's going to be time to clean up your tools. So in order to do that, you need to use the bucket, please don't just go to the sink. That's a lot of clay to send down to the sink. So I'm first just going to take my sponge and use that as my cleaner. I'm going to clean off my metal scraper, make sure it's nice and clean. Then I can just gently tap it, and as long as I don't need to go to the sink, I can just lay it right on my red rag. For this tool, hey, you're just going through, it's like washing dishes. So you're going to go through, wash all of your dishes, make sure they're nice and clean. If you feel like they need an extra rinse, like this one could use an extra rinse at the sink, and I would just put it off to the side and I'll do that. Same thing for this one. These texture plates though, however, as they get wet, they like stick together, so we kind of want to dry them a little bit with a paper towel afterwards. So I'm not necessarily going to put mine in here unless it was massively full of clay and I had clay chunks in here, but mine's pretty clean. In terms of my my rolling pin, this one is fairly clean, so I wouldn't necessarily have to do it, but if I have like little goobers here, please do not use your nail to necessarily dig at that. If you start to create divots or you dig at this with any of these tools, then you create carvings in the wood, and then suddenly you can't get a nice smooth slab. So just take your sponge and gently wipe it. If it's really dirty, you can stick the rolling pin into the bucket and then wet down and clean the rolling pin. You do need to dry these before you put them away, so I would just put this off to the side too. Same concept with the slab sticks. Mine are really actually pretty clean, so I could just go put these back in the bin, or if they were really dirty, I'd put them in here. Be careful, do not get a sliver. Okay, and then I have this one. This one needs just a little bit here, and I'm probably gonna need to go to the sink and do just a final rinse. So when we go to the sink, the idea is not to be dumping a whole bunch of clay down. I can check my hands too. If my hands are really full of clay, I would also wash them, especially if you're over at wheel throwing, your hands get really full of clay. You'll need to wash them in the buckets first, then go to the sink. In terms of my canvas here, if you have a lot of crumbs, you can very carefully take it over to the garbage can and shake it out. If it's not bad, then you're just going to fold it into thirds and you're going to put it up at the front of your table. I do not want anything left in the bucket, so I am going to walk around and check. Squeeze out your sponge, that one can go. And these are all specialty tools that I'm going to have to put away. So I'm going to double check your desk. You actually should have 2 modeling tools. So I need to put one back here at this table. Okay? If you're on a double table here, then there should be 4 modeling tools. So 2 modeling tools per student. You should have a metal scraper and you should have a sponge on your red washcloth. Everything else is a specialty tool and needs to be put away. So I'm going to do that. That's how you clean up for the end of the day, and then I'll come around and spray your desks. I'm going to give you an extra dose of spray today. Please, please, please make sure that you really wipe it down well. And if you have any dust streaks, that's dust particles that are remaining on the desk. That's not good for overall health long term. So please make sure you do a good job wiping everything down. Make sure it is nice and clean. The process for cleaning the wheel head after you finish wheel throwing is simple. You're going to clean all of your tools in your bucket just right next to the wheel. So make sure your sponge and your modeling tools or any tools that you use, you clean that up. And then right next to the table, there's a green bucket with a large sponge inside of it. You just empty out the sponge and then you can turn your wheel on. If you have a lot of clay, you can take your modeling tool and you can very carefully start introducing it and scrape up that extra clay off of the wheel head. Okay, and that can go into the bucket. Then I would have to clean this tool. Then what I would do is just start taking that big sponge and I'm going to wipe down the wheel head. Okay, so this is the cleaning process to get the wheel head clean. Again, you can use the tool if it's really stuck on there. After the wheel head is clean, you can turn it off and you're going to take and you're going to scoop the big sponge all the way around to clean the entire tray. So we wash the tray so that it's nice and clean out for the next student. So get all the way around the rim. Don't leave that a mess for them. You might have to empty out your sponge once or twice to get it fully clean. Okay. And that way it is ready for the next student. Make sure you leave the desk nice and neat. The canvas should be just off to the side on the right-hand side, and your tools should be nice and neatly placed onto your red rag.